Hello and welcome everyone to today's video. So as you can see, I have two boxes of Time Spiral Remastered here, and you'll also notice that they've been opened because I had two separate incidences that I'm going to talk about that are going to explain why and what we're going to do for this video instead of doing a traditional box opening one. So first of all, the first video I did, I ended up having an issue with the file and it got cut off and I lost like 90% of the box opening. So that was a little frustrating because that was quite a good box. And the second box I have the video from, but I wasn't really happy with how it turned out. You know, as you'll see, the box, this one in particular, wasn't that great, and there's some things about it. I got kind of upset, you know, when I was doing the video, and just overall, the quality wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I thought it's a great opportunity to kind of take a second chance, go back in time, will you, and to redo the videos the way I prefer them to be. So what I'm going to do, instead of obviously opening the packs, now that I can't, is just talk about the cards from each box and kind of show you what the contents were, and then go from there. So first thing though is the buy box promo. So this is a Lotus Bloom. So interesting that it's the only card from Time Spiral that's actually in the old frame like this, and that's why it's a promo. Yeah, a little bit of pringling. You can see it's got a bit of a bend to it, so disappointing in that regard, but I mean, ultimately not surprising given the way that they are. Certainly could have been worse, but yeah, still an issue. Not happy with that. So let's start with the first box. And again, I'm going to bypass all the commons and uncommons and just shoot straight for the other contents. So we'll set these aside and we're going to look at, so first I'm going to talk about the foil. So for the foils, I'm just going to throw in some random anecdotes that I mentioned when I was doing the video, because that ended up being one of the longest box opening videos I actually made, and that's probably why I had some of the problems was. So we had Thalid Shell Dweller. So this was one of the main themes, especially in the first set, the Time Spiral block. Time Spiral, Realis Fungus putting counters on it, and this was the common one. That was kind of the backbone of a lot of those style decks, where they put counters on and then they can remove counters to make Saproling. So it is a throwback to the original Thalid, which was in the set as one of the time shifted cards. And so they kind of took that theme and made a bunch more fungus and built around it. So it was actually pretty fun to draft too. Then we get Dreamstalker. Not too exciting. The art is pretty ugly. And then we have another Thalid here. So this is from one of the later sets. And this one allows you to turn Thalids into, or Saplings I should say, into kind of Birds of Paradise. I guess a more accurate would be like a treasure in terms of treasures. Then we have Skittering Monstrosity. So this was a take on the old Urza Saga skittering creatures, where they have like a drawback. There's like a 2-mana double black 3/2 flying, and then you cast a creature spell and sacrifice it. So really what they've done is kind of taken it to the next level. In this case, made it a 5/5, which by today's standards is pretty laughable that would have a drawback at all, let alone one that's this severe. And then we have our charge land. So in this case, we're looking at Dreadship Reef. So these were actually played in standard a lot, and especially the black blue and the black white ones for the control decks, because they would allow them to do something with their mana on later in the on turns when they didn't have anything to do. You know, they had all their mana up and your opponent didn't play anything. And then later in the game, it would allow them to play things like the flashback, mystical teachings, and other stuff. So surprisingly, these lands were really good in their time. Then we have Blade of the Sixth Pride. So what's interesting to know about this one is this is all new art. And I think it has to do with the fact that originally this was a part of a cycle of vanilla creatures in Future Sight that had the alternate frame, but they were full art. And so it covered the whole frame. And I think with this one, they probably couldn't shrink the art down and have it look right. It probably didn't look you know, good enough with the way it was originally designed versus the way it is now. So it's got new art, new text box. Obviously, I don't think it looks anywhere near as nice as the original, so more just a throwback. The other interesting note about this card is that it is a rebel, so there was a big rebel mechanic in the block. I shouldn't say big, it was like a minor one in white that you could draft, and it leached over to black for the first time. Then we have everyone's favorite mana type. So this, of course, is a time-shifted Force Spike, which was the bane of many players to this day that are unsuspecting playing against white decks to have their counter spells countered. I think with this kind of card, you just have to like play it as almost like it is just a counter spell, right? Like, don't feel bad that you got God or anything, but you know, just play through it. And especially if you didn't know it's there, there's nothing you can do. So don't feel like if you ever get got by Manatide that, it's something you did wrong. And then we have the saddest little monkey around, the Simian Spirit Guide. And, while I'm a big fan of the original one because it has the time-shifted border, I do like the art on this. I like that it has like that kind of red glowy little glowy outline on the back of the body, kind of I think assimilating that it's being turned into mana. So that was pretty cool. It's a shame that we can't actually play with this version of the art in Modern, but I assume it's still legal in Legacy and some other older formats at least. And then we get Deadly Grub. So this one is a little bit of a throwback in that it has Vanishing, but then it makes a 6/1 green insect token with Shroud, which is Deadly Insect. So as you can see, it goes from a grub and then goes up to an insect. So we'll throw back there. And then we get Sangrophage, which is a throwback to Carnophage, which was 1 mana, I believe, 2/2, with a similar ability. So it'd punish you, and kind of would be in those aggressive black decks that didn't really care about the white totals. So those are my regular foils. Now let's move on to my rares, this box. And let me find the seam here. All right, so there we go. All right, so it's one of the most expensive rares in the set is Pact Negation. So I did hit one of those in this box, which is very nice. And Pact, of course, is part of the Pact cycle, where you could play it, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you'd have to pay a cost. If not, you'd lose the game. So originally, these cards were kind of a pain to play in any kind of tournament, because if you did just forget and you drew your card for the turn, you'd automatically lose the game. Now they've changed the rules to be a little more forgiving in that you can rewind to the point where you'd have to pay, which ultimately, I think I'm a fan of. While the idea of that the tournament integrity, that you didn't pay, you skipped it, it does make sense from a competitive point of view. It ultimately, I think, leaves a lot of feel bads, and it kind of makes you not want to play these cards when the drawback is that severe that you lose the game. So I'm okay with there being a system in place to prevent that from happening. I remember there's some players would even try to remind their opponents of it because they didn't want the game to end due to this, right? Because it's a pretty terrible way to lose the game by just forgetting something as a pact. Now, one thing to note, there was a deck, there was the Amulet Titan deck. Originally ran the 6 mana enchantment. I don't remember the name of it, but it was from one of the core sets that would copy spells. And so the alternate win condition in the Pact deck, in the Titan decks originally was to play things like Pact of the Titan and Summoning Pact to essentially copy it for your opponent as well, so that they would be forced to pay it. And then obviously if they weren't playing even the colors or didn't have the mana, if you played multiple packs, they would just lose. So that I thought was kind of interesting, and that you're not just cheesing out the win via your opponent forgetting, you're actually forcing them to pay something they can't pay. So I think this is a very interesting cycle, and I think once they got the rules right, it made it a lot more player friendly. All right, and then we have Magus of the Future. So in the original block for Time Spiral, they had a lot of Magus creatures. There was they're essentially based on a lot of broken cards in the past, and they kind of took them and based them on an homage to them. You had things like Magus of the Moat. It was one of the white cards, and then so these ones were based on the enchantments. Magus of the Future being, of course, based on Future Sight from Onslaught, where you could play the top card of your library. And the idea with the Magus is that they'd be more vulnerable being on a creature. So I believe they did artifacts and lands as well. So there should be there's I think a cycle for everyone, because I know they Time Spiral, I believe, had artifacts as the Maguses, and then I think the lands were in the second set. So it's pretty cool that you got things like Magus in the library and other things that you could see. So if you go online, you can see all of them. And like I said, I don't think most of them got reprinted in Time Spiral, but a couple other ones did. So we'll see those later. All right, and then we have our first split second card. So this is a mechanic I really like because essentially it stops your opponent from interacting with it. And a lot of the effects are removal and things, so that allows you to deal with kind of permanents that can be a pain to deal with if your opponent has a chance to respond either by countering something or activating an ability to prevent it from dying. This one is kind of like basically like the board wipe of the group. Being able to turn all your opponent's attackers into 0/2s essentially destroys them all, right? If you have a decent sized board. Or even if you have something that gives creatures -2/-2, this of course will do the trick as well. And it's always interesting to know that they lose all abilities too. So essentially neutralizes them and turns them into 0/2s for you to do whatever you want. So again, this is one that a lot of people don't see coming and is often pretty devastating. Then we have Cloud Key, which is a card that I learned was actually getting quite expensive, being in Future Sight. So this is a good reprint in that regard. We have Safi's Eric's Daughter. So this isn't the original art for Safi. Safi was, of course, referenced on the card in Commander Legends. So Hans is, you can see in the top right here, that's Hans. So Hans has a card, I believe it's by the same artist, so that's why they redid Safi so that they link up. So if you get Hans and Safi, you can play, you can relive the storyline there. Safi's actually not bad. She did see play in some combo decks. The fact that she can recur creatures, and then if you can loop her too, you can do a lot of shenanigans with that. And then speak of the Megases, we have Megas of the Moon. I actually like the original art better on this one. I'm not sure why they changed it, but I definitely play with my original ones over this art, though. I mean, I think this art is fine. I do like that it has the Blood Moon in the background, so it's cool. But I just have an affinity for like original art, especially with Megas of the Moon. And then speaking of the packs, so this is Pack of the Titans. So this one really didn't see much play outside the combo decks. Paying 5 mana for 4/4 is okay. Not something you really want to do in Constructed. But it is nice that you can surprise people because essentially it is a 4/4 flash creature for 5 mana. Then we have Jaya Ballard, Taskmate. So Jaya is part of the is one of the spell shapers that was originally from the mechanic was originally in Mercadian Mask, where essentially they have spell effects that you have to discard a card. So you get to treat a card in your hand like it was the spell. So in her case, she's kind of got 3 different spell shaper effects. As far as her playability, I don't remember seeing her being played in any decks. It was certainly an interesting card. I just don't know that anything actually ended up playing her. What's cool though is that red and black in this set were the Madness colors, so you could play her, with a bunch of Madness cards and take advantage of the fact that she's a spell shaper. Okay, next we have Glittering Wish. So Glittering Wish was a callback to the Wish cycle that was in Judgment that allowed you to reveal a card type and essentially put it from your, either if you're playing casually outside the game or if you're playing in a tournament, it would have to be from your sideboard. This is the 6th Wish, so one that they made that was based on multicolored cards. And this one's seen a little bit of play. I know in Modern it would spike in some decks that allowed you to kind of go and treat your sideboard as like a tutor package. Though I don't think it's seen any real sustained play. Though it did get a little bit expensive for a while there. It's been reprinted a few times and that's tanked the value. It is interesting though that in the art, you can see in the back right there, the character is like Urnum the Djinn, which was featured in the set that this was printed in. So Judgment had Urnum the Djinn reprinted for the first time in a long time, and it was kind of like the his art for that is kind of the iconic image from Judgment. So it's a cool throwback that they put Urnum in the art. Next we have an upgraded Teleria West. So originally Teleria West was an uncommon, but I think given the power level of the card, it's a logical choice to move it up to rare. It's a very good card in that if you look at the transmute, you typically think of transmuting as just, for spells, creatures, whatever. But with Teleria West being a land and having a mana cost of 0, you can actually go and get other lands with it. So it's not only allows you to get 0 mana stuff, but it allows you to go get anything that is a land as well. So it's very versatile. Sees play in like Aim and the Titan decks to this day because you can go get any land you want. You can also get Summoner's Pact. So it's a very versatile card. And I can imagine in formats like Commander, it's also probably a staple for certain decks that have a lot of different lands and other utility cards they want to get. Okay, we have Kavrak the Merciless. Yeah, I remember opening this one a lot in Time Spiral. I think it was getting a little bit expensive. It seems like it's quite good in Commander though. Pretty annoying, in fact. Though when this first came out, that wasn't a format. We have Rada, Heir to Keld. So Rada, I don't think saw much play at all. I mean, the interesting is that the ability's gotten better now that Mana Burn's not around. And that you can, if you want to attack, you can add the mana, and then I guess it's a May ability, so it doesn't matter anyways. But even if it didn't, you could still, not be punished by it. But like I said, never really saw play. Cool card though. I like that you can either attack and add mana, or just leave it and then add green mana. The art is pretty cool too with the head there, severed head. We have Extirpate, which before Surgical Extraction was kind of like one of the main effects that was used by this card, because before that we only had things like Cranial Extraction, which were 4 mana. So having a cheap 1 mana option, especially at split second, is pretty cool. But now that you have a free one in surgical, you know, extra pay doesn't really see any play. Though I do like the art is cool. The face is pretty creepy, though. Usually in split second cards, lightning bolt in the middle tends to show two different states, and it almost looks like it's the same face, just like the line down the middle. So I don't know really what I'm supposed to be seeing between the two, you know, the time that's taken place, but cool art, creepy art nonetheless. Here we have Muraganda petroglyphs. So this was in the Future Sight time shifted frame, and I think it was because it referenced creatures with no abilities. Yeah, I mean, it was like, you had stuff like the cat we saw earlier, that was a vanilla creature, so there was a cycle of those and some other cards, but generally speaking, you know, this is kind of a miss. This is one I could have done without in the set. All right, we got Slaughter Pact. So this was another good pact. It's mostly seen as like a one-of in some decks. I think it's kind of gone out of favor recently, but it was seen to play in a lot of green-black based mid-range decks as sort of a nice tool you can use to take care of a creature when you're tapped out. One thing to note is that with all the packs is that they've added this little symbol here to show the color, because before they used to have to put it in the text box that would tell you what color it was, because of course not having a mana cost means that you have no color, but they've come up with this cool little symbol there to show you instead. All right, next we have Mangara of Condor. So this one has new art. I'm not sure why they gave it new art, but it does. The cool thing about Mangara is that you do a little trick where if you activate the ability on the stack, if you can blink out or somehow get Mangara off the battlefield before the ability resolves, then you can reuse Mangara again and it won't get exiled. So it only gets exiled if the ability resolves and it's still in play. So I think it did see a little bit of a play in some older formats because of that, which makes it an interesting card to build around in a deck. All right, next we have Hivestone. So this one's interesting in that if you're building this with a deck in mind, I'd always be confused about how many slivers you actually want, given that you're playing non-slivers, but then you want to play the other slivers for the abilities. So it's interesting. I've never seen a deck with it, so I don't really know what the right number of it is, but it's definitely interesting to build around. Make your own slivers. And then we have our first sliver, so Pulmonic sliver. So this one gives flying, which is interesting for white, right? And then if it's put into a graveyard, we put it on top of its owner's library instead. So kind of a protecting sliver. Next we have Care Keep. So Care Keep references the kobolds, which finally got tokens in this set. So they're 0/1 red creatures that are named kobolds. And there was a bunch in some of the older sets. So this is a nice little reference to that and the ability to make them. They have Angel of Salvation. So this brings back Convoke and allows you to use it to prevent damage. So pretty cool. Then we have Benalish Commander. So this is one of the big suspend cards. So there's a cycle of these ones that have X in their suspend costs, and they would do something when a time counter is removed. And this one allows you to make tokens. I don't remember this one seeing a lot of play, so not a lot to say about this one. Greater Gargadon is an awesome card. You can still see it in Modern to this day in like Restore Balance decks, where you right before you resolve or restore balance, you sacrifice all your stuff, and then the Gargadon comes off when everything's gone away, and your opponent has to sacrifice a bunch of stuff, essentially leaving the battlefield empty or almost empty, and you have a 9/7 with haste. So this card has seen play in other decks too. It was just an all-around cool design. The fact that you can remove stuff to take the spend counters off, and yeah, I mean, it's great even if you're just going to use it to sacrifice creatures and that are going to die, right? You just sacrifice them to this to remove the suspend counters. We have a foil Walk the Aeons. So Walk the Aeons uses the buyback mechanic, which is from the Tempest block of sacrificing 3 lands. So it's certainly not a cheap buyback cost, and certainly not something you can do a lot, but it does allow you to take an extra turn, and then maybe later in the game take an extra turn as well. This one is mostly just in combo decks, I believe, and I'm not sure it was that prevalent at that, but I'm sure there's certainly ways you can take advantage of the effect to loop it, or at least get a few uses out of it. We have one of the best packs next to Pact Negation, Summoner's Pact. This still sees play to this day in all the Primeval Titan based decks for its ability to go fetch it for 0 mana and cast it. And because it's the Primeval Titan decks, the paying 4 mana on the next upkeep usually won't be a big deal. And next we have Tombstalker. So before some of the recent Khans Delve cards that we are going to see later, Tombstalker was kind of the original Delve creature that's all out of play. Unfortunately, I think the fact that it has double black in its mana cost has kind of made it worse than the other ones, even though compared to Gurmag Angler, for instance, it does have flying. But those ones are easier to cast because you can delve all the, delving down to 1 black versus 2 black is a big difference. So, especially in the older frame, this looks really nice. It's kind of weird to see it in a regular frame with that art, but I do love the art. So a little sad it doesn't see more play. Heartwood Storytellers is interesting because it's a symmetrical effect. So if you play a non-creature spell, your opponent gets to draw a card. So interesting in that regard. Then we have Draw New Lich Lord. So this is the backbone of the standard control decks at the time. And the deck was actually called Draw New at the Louvre, I think. One of those crazy deck names. Looking at the card, even like now, you think the drawback is pretty big, sacrificing permanents whenever it's dealt damage. But in those decks, it didn't matter. They would take control of the board. By the time he would Draw New would hit the board, and at that point, it was basically over. His ability to get flashback to stuff is pretty strong, and there's not even a restriction on it. So, you can respond to your opponent playing a spell by giving a counter spell in your graveyard flashback and casting it. So, really, when he dropped, the game was basically over at that point. All right, then we have Aeon Chronicler. So this again was part of the cycle of cards that did stuff when it was suspended. So in this case, you get to draw cards. This is probably one of the better ones of this cycle, and did see some play because you get to draw cards off it. And it's one of those ones where you almost don't want it to come off suspend because it allows you to draw an extra card every turn. And then hopefully by the time it comes in, you get a giant hasted beater that you can attack your opponent with. So a really cool card, and one that was actually quite balanced for the time. So this is a good example of a card that's not too powerful, but it's fun enough, to play around and quite strong. Then we had Sedge Sliver, which is a throwback to a red creature, Troll, from before. So it gets +1 design to have a swamp, and you can pay a black to regenerate. Angel's Grace, so this is new artwork on Angel's Grace. It does see play in decks like Ad Nauseam, where you can use it to not lose the game. And then you can throw it on stuff like Icecrown Scepter and really take advantage of that. All right, we have Stuffy Doll. So this is kind of the original. Lately, they printed a couple cards that kind of emulate this. But this is the original one where whenever it's dealt damage, the damage goes to your opponent. It got reprinted in a core set with some new art, but I do love the original kind of voodoo doll look. So I'm a big fan of them using the original art still. And just an all-around annoying card. And the fact that it can tap to deal damage to itself is just, it's pretty funny. All right, and we have Draining Whelk. So Draining Whelk is a throwback to the Whelks, which I believe are from Time Spiral. And this one allows you to counter spells. Time Spiral block did have a bit of a blinking theme, so it's cool that you can blink this one out and then counter another spell when it comes back in. Or if your opponent's playing a big spell, you can get more counters on it. So a pretty cool creature, and kind of a throwback again to Whelks and just even like cards like Mystic Snake. And then my last rare I have is Ith, High Arcanist. So I had forgotten when I opened this card that this card had suspend. I didn't even remember this card had suspend, so I was kind of like shocked. It was one of those Mandela effect things where you look at it and you're like, wait, this has suspend? Like, what? So, because I always looked at it like it was a Maze of Ith homage card explaining who Ith was. So it's cool that this also just happens to have suspend. So there you go. So those are my rares. So again, I got some pretty good ones, some packs. Pretty awesome. I'm going to quickly go through my mythics. So they did reprint the cycle no mana cost suspend cards. So Hypergenesis is probably one of my favorites. Unfortunately, it's banned like in every format. So while it's cool to get another mythic copy of it, it feels kind of useless. But again, it's cool nonetheless. Now we have Gauntlet of Power. So this one is a throwback to Gauntlet of Might, I believe. I could be wrong about that though. That boosted up red cards. But this one's cool because you get to name the color. Though it is symmetrical, so you don't have to watch if you're playing it like an EDH. And again, this one to get upgraded to Mythic. And we have another upgrade. Well, I guess they're all upgrades because there were no Mythics back then. But we have Vesuva, which is quite strong. It was in the first deck that got banned in Modern, being Cloudpost, because obviously being able to copy Cloudpost is quite strong. And still sees play in Amulet Titan decks for its versatility to be able to mimic any land you want. So the drawback of coming to play tapped isn't that big a deal when you can do some interesting things with it. And then I was surprised, happy, and forgot it was in the set. But we have Tarmogoyf with the original art. Now, I'll never replace the original because I love the feature sight frame, but it's still awesome to see Tarmogoyf with the original art, because I believe every other instance of Tarmogoyf had different art with it. So I do love the original art, and the fact that it's a little bit blown up so you can kind of see the person here in the claws of Tarmogoyf, and it's kind of turkey neck giblets thing going on there is pretty awesome. And then I also hit a foil Gauntlet of Power, so that is pretty sweet as well. I do like the Gauntlet. So those are my mythics. So again, I got 4 mythics plus a foil. And then lastly, we have our time shifted cards. So given that they are kind of the highlight of the box, we're going to go through these quickly. So Ever Experiment is kind of a strange one. I don't know really where this sees play and why anyone would want it. I'm assuming they didn't have any options, so they went with this one, though I'd rather have like an Is It Charm or something instead of this, but they can all be winners. Anger of the Gods. So I like the card, and unfortunately with the artist being problematic, I think the Wizards didn't have a chance to change the art. So, you know, the card is good. It still sees play in Modern. It's just the art is problematic, we should say. Okay, then we have Slimefoot Stowaway, which again, not a popular competitive card, though I think it does have a lot of fans in Commander. So again, I don't have a problem with that if it's that audience. Elvish Mystic, pretty awesome to get this in the original frame, so you can play the old framed Mystics with your Llanowar Elves and have them all be the same. Remand, which is an awesome one, and I think the art certainly looks like it belongs in the old frame. So from Ravnica block, it's certainly a good one to pull. Fibbletheft, which is from War of the Spark, so it's a relatively new card. I know Homunculus used to be printed a lot more, so I'm assuming that's kind of why I got the call. But an odd one a little bit for sure. Then we have Paradoxical Outcome. So this one's big in Vintage, right? So that makes sense to me as why it's being into the set. So again, I think that's cool that they did that for Vintage. Courser Kruvix. So this one's has a little bit of controversy, given that it doesn't have kind of the enchantment frame that it did have in Theros. But I do like the card, and I'm glad they got put in this sweet frame, because it does see play from time to time still. And we have Ninja of the Deep Hours. So Ninja of the Deep Hours is from Betrayers of Kamigawa, and really one of the baseline ninjas when you think of the mechanic of ninjutsu. And I am a big fan of ninjutsu, so I think it's cool that this card got printed with the old frame. Hopefully we can see more ninjas in the future. And Trinket Mage is another kind of old school throwback-ish style card that sees play in older formats and things like Commander. And I'm glad they used the original art instead of like the Scars of Mirrodin art, because that art is pretty sick. And then we have Kasali Pride Mage. So Pride Mage used to be pretty popular. I think Reclamation Sage has taken some of the wind out of its sails, but it was a pretty strong card before. The ability to blow up an enchantment when it's on the board is pretty nice. And the fact that it naturalizes instead of choosing one or the other gives a lot of versatility. And you have Exalted thrown on there too, so when you play it, you still get some value out of it. So I like that card. Cloud Shredder Sliver, a little bit of an odd inclusion. Again, like a Boros Charm would have been pretty cool instead, but I don't know. I don't make the choices. All right, so Harvester of Souls, again, another random one, but a black has such high quality ones, you really can't complain. You only have a card like this in there, and I'm assuming there's some part of the fan base out there that enjoys this card, so. Well, that's all I got to say about that. Path to Exile, a great choice, and I love that they used the original art. Makes me want to get a playset of this one. And Staple and Modern. And Waste, so this is funny that Waste gets the old frame. I mean, it makes sense. It's just, you know, if you're going to play in a deck, you probably need multiple copies of it, so it's going to get a little expensive. Prized Amalgam, so us Dredge players can rejoice getting a sweet old school framed Prized Amalgam. And I actually do really like the gold border from the old style, so I think that's sick that it's available in that frame. Silence is kind of an odd choice. You know, it's kind of a throwback, I guess, to things like Orm's Chant and some of the older effects like this. Card that got reprinted a bunch of times in core sets. Doesn't really see play though, so yeah, kind of a dud in my books. Field of Ruin, so a somewhat recent card, but this one's being played in a bunch of different formats, like Modern and Pioneer and such, so I think this is a great inclusion, and the art doesn't look out of place either in the frame, so thumbs up. Then we have Time of Need. So this is from Champions of Kamigawa. Just a good tutor for legendary creatures. So the art is kind of weird though, like the monk or wherever that is standing there, the way the legs are, it's kind of weird. This one I was surprised didn't get like new art, because I would definitely have replaced the art on that if that was my choice. All right, then we have Sanguine Bond, which unfortunately isn't the more expensive of these two combo ones with exquisite blood. But it's pretty cool though that I think it sees a lot of play in Commander, so it's cool that it gets new old frame. They have a Containment Priest, which a few years ago would have been really cool, but once it got reprinted in M21, I noticed the value really dropped on these. But it's cool though, if you want to, you can play with full art, you can play with newer art, and you can play with this old school art, which I believe is the original art. And then it looks, but to me it looks like it fits right in this frame. It almost looks like it's a kind of a Mirage era style card art. So I appreciate that, even if it's not expensive. All right, then we have one of our Delve creatures, so Gurmag Angler. So this is pretty sick, given that it sees play. Not as much in Modern as it did when it first arrived, but still a strong card, and one that I think is an awesome inclusion. That creepy little tongue body reminds me of the scene in SpongeBob, the first movie there, where he goes and gets tricked by basically the same kind of creature. We have Past in Flames, so for our Storm players out there, we get a sick version of Past in Flames. So again, pretty cool to see that in the old border, with the original art too. And if Zealous Conscripts is a bit of a strange one. I know it combos with Kiki-Jiki and some other cards, but not really sure who was clamoring for that in the original old school frames. Oops. Then we have SRAM, Senior Edificer. So this one does see play in Pioneer and Cheerio decks in Modern, so that's pretty cool that it gets the old school frame, and certainly one of the cards I think is a good candidate for this, given that it sees lots of play. And then we have Shriekmaw. So Shriekmaw, I wouldn't say is a card that sees a lot of play to this day, but I do like the art for Shriekmaw, and I think it's a cool card. I know it used to see play in Living Index, which exactly aren't popular, even though they're picking up a little bit of steam. But yeah, it's just more of like a fun card, and one that just looks cool, the creepy elemental art. So while, if it wasn't a card I liked, I think I would say it was a miss. I like it. And then we have Beast Within, which is a very strong card, and it sees play in a lot of decks, so anywhere from Living End to Tron, and kind of anything that wants a good catch-all card like this is pretty awesome, and I like that it's in the original frame, so kudos on that one. And then we have the other Delve creature, so Tasker, the Golden Fang. So it just looks cool, especially with the black frame on this, and it's got the hybrid mana, so all around a good choice. And then Cranial Plating. So before the banning of Mox Opal, this would have been, I think, a pretty clear hit. I still think it's awesome. I think the art really matches well with the frame. It's just it's super cheap because it's not really seeing any play, because they basically banned Affinity in Modern. But hey, if it ever comes back though, you're gonna wish you had a playset of these waiting. And it makes me almost want to get one regardless. All right, and then we have Lavinia. So a somewhat recent card again, but I think it's great that they're putting cards that are played in older formats. Especially with this one, it does look really nice with the old school frame. All right, and then we have Crystal Shards. So this goes all the way back to Mirrodin. So one of the first cards are printed in the not original frame. Yeah, this one is interesting. I remember I played it in Block Constructed, because you can do things like bounce your own Eternal Witness really easily. Because obviously if you're bouncing it yourself, you're not going to pay the 1 mana, and if your opponent ever taps out, then you can bounce their creatures for only 1 blue. Knight of the Reliquary, a great choice for a gold card. Just a strong overall card, and one that fits nicely with the gold border. So I love that. Okay, here we got some heavy hitters now. So we got Kiki-Jiki, Mirror Breaker. So using the original artwork is awesome. I remember I got this in the Kamigawa pre-release, and at the time you had to pass your pool, and I think I'd opened the 2 most expensive cards, being Time Stop and Cranial Traction. It was pretty bummed when I had to do that, and I got, Kiki-Jiki was the best card in my pool. And little did I know that Kiki-Jiki would obviously end up being the grand slam of what I opened and what I passed and everything. And this card is just awesome. Seeing play in Splinter Twin. Even to this day, it sees play in attempted revivals of that deck. And even if you're just playing it fairly, the ability to make a token of anything that's non-legendary is awesome. So I love that it's in the original frame with the original art. Great choice. Then we have True Name Nemesis. So again, another card that sees a lot of legacy play in the old school frame. Just a great choice all around, and pretty cool looking card. And then we have Yawgmoth Thran Physician. So I actually needed a 4th Yawgmoth, so it's pretty cool that I was able to get it via the old school frame. And this card again looks just sick with the black border. And then we have one of the hits. So the Chalice of the Void is again looks awesome. I don't know if it necessarily looks better than the original frame, like the Mirrodin frame, but I think it's awesome that it's original art, and artifact frame I think just in general looks pretty cool. Pretty cool. And then we get 2 foils. So that Epic Experiment foil, yeah, not much to say about that one. You know, not all the foils are gonna be home runs, and that certainly wasn't. And yeah, Exquisite Firecraft, I think it sees play sometimes in burn sideboards, but yeah, looks cool, but not really worth, not really what you want to hit. So that was my first box. So again, overall I was pretty happy though. You know, got 2 foils, got a foil Mythic, you know, got the Tarmogoyf, got the Chalice, the packs, you know, a lot of good stuff in this box. So it was a good first box. And as you see, my second box here isn't going to be quite as exciting. So this will be a little bit quicker as I go through this box. Yeah. All right, so let's start off with the foils. So we get Sulfur Elemental, which I think saw play for a while. It's funny enough, like a hate card for white creatures. I don't know if the original intention was that, but the fact that it's got Split Second and Flash makes me think maybe it was to kind of rain down on it. So this card was, you know, a few bucks back in the day when it's all modern play. It was, you know, obviously really good against a deck full of one-toughness white creatures. Haven't really seen play in a while, but I always love me a good Sulfur Elemental. Then you have Griffin Guide, which is a throwback to Elephant Guide from Judgment. In this case, it gets +2/+2 in flying and creates a 2/2 white Griffin. So pretty strong card in limited. I think it might have seen a tiny bit of standard play, but all around a cool card. Then there's our Sliver with flanking. So flanking is from Mirage, so just a good combat trick. And then we have Might Sliver, which is kind of our giant +2/+2 sliver. So pretty awesome if you're drafting slivers or even you're playing a sliver deck. Uktabi Drake, so based around the Uktabi Orangutan from, I think it was the Mirage block? I think so, I can't remember. This one has Echo, so, and it's kind of got that color pie shifted flying haste thing going on there. And we got one of the hardest to pronounce cards in the whole block, Tysis. I think that's what it is. What I really want to say is like Fifth, but I know that's not it. So this one's got Suspend. It's actually quite strong. I mean, look at the mana cost, it's 7 mana, so you definitely want to suspend this. But the funny thing with suspending removal spell, right, is that your opponent knows it's there, so you play this whole cat and mouse game of like, do I commit more of the board? Especially this one being 5 suspend counters, it's going to be there for a while sitting there, so you pretty much just have to ignore it. And again, I love how all these suspend cards have like the, you know, the time bubble here that shows it coming off suspend. We have Dark Heart Sliver, so this was a tribute to Dark Heart of the Woods from, I believe, The Dark. Where you can sacrifice force to gain 3 life, but in this case, your slivers are the ones being sacrificed. We have Mind Stab, so we're looking at the Thralls from Tempest, and this one discards 3 cards. Let's get that creepy Thrall with like the legs and arms crawling through. And then we have Slipstream Serpent, so take on the old can't attack unless you control islands. And then this one can't, if you have control no islands, can't, you can sacrifice it. Now the cool thing is it does have morph, so if you do attack and then morph it up, then you don't have to worry about that first restriction because it's already been tapped and attacking. So you can get around it once. And then last we have Needle Peak Spider, so this is a throwback to Giant Spider. That was a 2/4 with reach, but because it's red, they flipped the stats around and it made it a 4/2. All right, so let's get to the rares, and some of these are gonna be duplicates, so again, we're gonna go pretty quick through these. Let me just parse out our rares. So again, another Walk the Aeons, another Pulmonic Sliver, oops. Fungus Sliver, so another one of the slivers. This one instead gives counters, so it plays a kind of the fungal theme that we did there. Another Chronicler, Jehora of the Gitu. So this one I think was pretty strong in Commander, right? Because you can exile any card. And you know, allows you to give it suspend, so pretty good as a Indizit Mage. And we have another Summoner's Pact, another Petroglyphs, Flagstones is Shrocare. So Flagstones ends up comboing with a bunch of different cards. As we're going to see, one of the other rares, I opened this box, combos with it. And to this day, you can play it with, I think it's Elvish Reclaimer from one of the M20. where you can sacrifice it to get a land, and then of course sacrificing flagstones gets you in a plane. So you can end up kind of chaining a bunch of flagstones together and doing that. But all around, even on its own, I mean, back in the day with the legend rule, you know, you'd sacrifice both and play 2. Now you get to keep 1 in play. So just an all around well designed card. Another Tombstalker, Sarah Avenger. So this card always had a lot of promise, and you can cheat it and play it with things like Aether Vial, but ultimately every time it's been printed like in core sets, and then of course the original Time Spiral, it's kind of always failed to live up to the hype. You know, if you play this fairly, it's a little slow being on turn 4, and then even cheating to play it ends up being not so great. There's our other pact. Porphyry Node, so I believe this is Drop of Honey, was the original card from an old set. That was in green. I don't remember this seeing any play, so it might see play, I guess, in Commander, but I don't really remember seeing it in any kind of 60 card constructed decks. Lotus Bloom, so there's our promo. So you can see the original art on our Lotus Bloom. Is again, you can see the time shifted and going on there when it's coming through the portal or whatever that is it's going through. And then we have another Teleria West, another Graded Gargadon, another Kavarek, Singer, Nosferatu. So the cool thing about this is that I did get one of the tokens in the pack. So given that they weren't printing tokens back then, it's cool that now you can get tokens for all these cards, especially with this one that has a very specific text on it. They didn't have to try to remember without it or write down on a piece of paper. Vesuvian Shapeshifter. So this was part of a combo deck in Standard that I believe was BDM that's discovered when he was drafting actually the set with Brine Elemental. The deck ended up being called Soggy Pickles, where you flip up, have a flipped up Brine Elemental, and then you can copy it with Vesuvian Shapeshifter, and when it gets turned face up, it'll copy the ability to prevent your opponent from untapping. And with the Vesuvian Shapeshifter turning face down every turn and then turning back up, you can repeatedly copy it. So essentially your opponent gets no untap step, which in Standard would often mean the game, right? If your opponent tapped all their lands down. So a pretty cool combo. It'd certainly be annoying, but it was, you know, you could break it up. All right, then we have the Lord for Saprolings. So this was each fungus gets +1 for each spore counter on it. So I guess it was the Fungus Lord, not the Sapling Lord. So it essentially turns the counters into +1 counters. A little counteractive to want to remove the counters. There's Hivestone, because you lose a +1. Another Magus of the Moon. So Thelonite Hermit. So there was a deck in Standard based around Glare Subdual. It was called Gauzy Glare because the other main card was Vitu-Gauzy City Tree. Was a land for Selesnya that allowed you to tap 4 mana and tap it to make it 1/1 Saproling. So the reason why I state that is that this is another card that got played in the deck because it made Saproling. So Glare Subdual would allow you to tap a creature to tap, I believe, a opposing creature or an artifact as well. Definitely creatures. It was based on, it was opposition. The blue enchantment allowed you to tap stuff, but it didn't let you tap lands because tapping lands is pretty gross. So this is one of the great cards in the deck because of course it makes 4/1/1. So in that deck you just wanted a bunch of bodies, however you can get them in order to tap your opponent's stuff down and then attack them with some big creature you played. So there's our Stuffy Doll. Life and Limb. So this is one of the kind of a throwback to the way a lot of the old cards used to be where they made lands into creatures. Angel's Grace, the Draining Well, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. So this was, it's still a highly played card in a lot of formats. The fact that it works for both players, it's great. And, you know, it's obviously great in any kind of multiplayer format. It actually was getting quite expensive despite being in some core sets. So this is a good reprint and one of the most expensive rares in the set. So a nice one to open. Another Sedge Sliver, Dryad Arbor. So this, just like Teleria West was upshifted, so was Dryad Arbor. And this one looks a little bit different because they're trying to make this one stand out because, of course, this card got the rules to be changed, and so that you couldn't put creature lands like this in your land section. They had to be brought up as creatures after, I believe it was Gabriel Nassif lost to his opponent having a Dryad Arbor in his lands and didn't realize, because it was the from the Vault version, that it wasn't just a regular forest. So because that one had a giant forest symbol in the text box. So this one they've made it very clear that this is no longer not just a land but also a creature. Also to note that this card is awesome because while it is, the drawback is that you can't tap it for mana the turn you play it, which is a pretty big drawback. Essentially it comes to play tapped almost, and that it is a 1/1 that your opponent can kill, so it's pretty easy to kill it. it is a forest and type line, so you can search it up with your fetch lands. So you can get it if you're looking, in decks like Boggles that want sometimes just need a creature to throw all their enchantments on. It is pretty cool that you can go and get one of these. Or if you're playing against a deck with Liliana the Veil and they make you sacrifice a creature, you can instant speed tutor up a Dried Arbor sacrifice instead. So a lot of cool things you can do with this card. There's another extirpate. And then Boom Bust. So this is the card that combos with flag stones because you can target it on your land, and then you get 2 mana, destroy a land, and you get to essentially replace it. And one thing I forgot to mention with flagstones is that it gets a plane. So when it was in standard, it could go get shock lands. So that was pretty cool. It would actually like fix your mana too. The other cool thing about Boom Bust was that for a while there with the cascade rules, you could cascade into the boom side and then play the bust side. So it kind of closed that loophole recently, but it was one of those things you could do where you can cast either side with it. So this card, I don't know if it sees a lot of play. I think if it does, it's going to be for the boom, where you see more play for the bust. So pretty cool card. And this was part of a cycle that was mono red split cards. There was the common one, which does a shock and bounces a creature, and then the uncommon one, which deals damage to all creatures that are with and without flying, I believe, different amounts. So it's an interesting cycle, and I like that they, that this card exists. It's cool. All right, then we have another Magus of the Future. And we have a foil Sappy Eric's Daughter. So I do have a foil, interesting enough, from the original Time Spiral. So it's kind of funny that I ended up with the new art of Sappy. All right, so let's get to our mythics. So we hit Achroma's Memorial. So that was clearly a card that should be mythic. Replicates, of course, of the original Achroma. So instead of just having Achroma, you have all these abilities, all your creatures get it. So this is a pretty good card in Commander. And ain't really any casual decks where having flying and haste and trample, and even in protection, right, in the right decks, against the right decks, can be pretty awesome. So a card I like to play a lot and have multiple copies of. One of my favorites in this cycle, Living End. So this one sees a lot of play in the modern deck. Though the popularity of the modern deck waxes and wanes depending on the format itself. The ability to replicate the original card of Living Death, where you basically essentially switch the graveyard with the in play. It's pretty cool. And it's funny that this card gets around some things that bring creatures back into play because it doesn't put them directly into play. It puts them into exile first and then puts them into play. So things like Grafdigger's Cage, even though you think they would work, because it literally is like a cage around the tomb there, the coffin. It doesn't actually work, so because again this exiles and then puts them into play from exile. All right, and then we have another one, Wheel of Fortune. So this, of course, is a rift on the original wheel. This one obviously isn't quite as good, and I don't know if it's really seen any play, but it's cool looking. So, and they wanted to make the entire cycle mythic, just due to the nature of the spells themselves. And I hit one of the big ones, so Gemstone Caverns. So this one was pretty expensive, and now we get it with the new colorless symbol as well. So you can get the version of that with that. And interesting card. So this was, I believe, this card designed by the community, which is why it has kind of a unique effect that it does have. So card that seems to play mostly in combo decks where they want to get to the board as fast as possible, so they don't mind being down a card in their hand. And then lastly, we got a foil Krovax Ascendant Hero. So I think this was made, upgraded to Mythic just because of the fact that it's Krovax, and Krovax was pretty big in the Weatherlight storyline. My first set was Nemesis, which featured Krovax, though that Krovax was black in the card color. So, and the art on that one's a lot better. This is kind of like if an alternate reality where he's a hero instead. So ultimate, it's kind of lame compared to the other version, but I could see why they did it because he was such an iconic card. Does not make for an expensive card though. So unfortunately, as far as mythics go, it's no Tarmogoyf for Sliver Legion. All right, so let's get to the Time Shifter cards, and this is where I'm going to try not to cry. But starting off with the good one, though, Field of Ruin, another great one to have. And a waste, not bad, not amazing, but not bad. Raminap, so the other lands they printed, I think were kind of weird. I mean, they tried to pick the best ones of the cycle, but they're all like uncommon cycles. So I don't know if Raminap seems to play anymore. Obviously, it had to be banned in standard, so it was pretty good there, but meh. Shriekmaw again, so cool to get one. Two's kind of meh. Relentless Rats. So this is one of the first cards I was spoiled with this frame. It's odd because you need so many, so I guess that was kind of the point, to collect a bunch in this frame. I don't know. I don't even know if anyone really even collects Relentless Rats anymore. No idea. Another Sanguine Bond. Gurmag Angler. So yeah, it's cool. You know, getting more than one is kind of meh. Path to Exile though, nice. Thumbs up. And especially looking at the black cards, right? Of all like the, you know, Yawgmoth and Thoughtseize and Layla and the Voids, it's like you hit those ones. Another Saram, so I like that. That's pretty cool. I'm glad to hit that. Sigil of the Empty Throne, a card I actually don't mind. I like, you know, it's clearly very strong if you can play enchantments to get all the tokens. But I don't know if it's really seen any serious play, but definitely for Commander. So a card I've always enjoyed because I like playing stupid enchantment decks like this where you just kind of run over with 4/4 Angels. Thugger Wisp, so this card is a staple of like the Death and Taxes style strategies. Not that one that I played a lot. I know you kind of need Vile to make this card really good, so it's fine. The art's kind of creepy, but looks kind of like a face hugger from Alien. But yeah, it's an okay inclusion. The fact that it sees play in older formats is good in my books. Sylvan Scrying, I can see why they didn't use the original art. It's kind of weird with the elf and the way she's posed. Don't know if I love this art though. I mean, I get the whole point is that it's supposed to look kind of drab and the water is kind of bringing light and color to everything, but I don't know if I love it. I don't know, I'm kind of torn on that one. Then we have another Courser, so not too bad. Monastery Swift Spear, so this is a pretty awesome one. And I think the art is just beautiful, right? Like the artist, Steve Argyle, you know, I don't know if he bases on a real person, but I think the drawing is just beautifully done. And the fact that it's like a staple in so many decks in Modern is it's just a plus, right? It's just a beautiful card and a really well-designed one. And can't say enough good things about Monetary Swiss Spear. Then we have Dreadhorde Arcanist. So even though it was banned in Legacy, I like this card. It's seeing play in Pioneer. And I'm sure there's some decks in Modern too that play it. And just an awesome card. Getting cast up for free is pretty sweet. And it is, you know, there is somewhat restrictive, so it doesn't just blatantly do it, but a cool card. This one I do enjoy that, even though it is just from War, that it got the old frame treatment. Another Zealous Conscripts, meh. Goblin Engineer, so this is the Modern Horizons pick. I mean, where's our Renin 6, but this is here nor there. Yeah, he's playing like with Urza and some decks. You know, Urza's not really being played Modern anymore. You know, probably awesome in Commander as well, so I don't really have a problem with this one. Not too shabby. Temur Battle Rage, so this is, you know, best friends, BFFs with Death Shadow, so cool. I like that it's, you know, in the old school frame, so thumbs up on that. Speaking of which, that would have been cool to see Death Shadow in the old frame. I don't think it got printed in that. Another Passing Flames. Cool. Repeal, so I think this card has been played in some decks, though I can't think of any on the top of my head. Interesting note, though, I do have an original, I think it's Guild Pact, Russian foil of this card. So that's pretty sick. That's about the best thing I can say about this. Laboratory Maniac, so unfortunately I think Lab Maniac has been replaced in the decks like ad nauseam with the little 2-mana Merfolk there that does something similar, just because it's 1 mana cheaper. So unfortunately, I don't think this is played quite as much. So it's a little dubious that it did get printed, though I guess at the time, you know, this was chosen like a year ago, it might have still been considered one of the, you know, ad nauseum win conditions. So in that regard, I can't fault them. Another Tricket Mage, cool. And then we get another Fibblethip and another Paradoxical Outcome. And Disdainful Stroke. So this is a little odd considering I don't know what decks really play it outside of Standard. And even then there's a lot of different versions you can play. So as you can see, right, the blue I got was pretty disappointing overall. So given that there was a lot of cool things like Remand and True Name you could open, you know, a little bit disappointing. This is not though. This was clearly the best Time Trip card I got. It was another Chalice of Void. So thumbs ups all around. Very happy with that. Also, you know, Love Me a Hollow one. You know, I know the deck is basically gone now that they banned Faithless Looting, but I'm hopeful it'll come back. And plus, I think the art looks awesome in the frame too, just the Egyptian look. And you know, it's one of those cards that you kind of, you know, your pet cards that not necessarily good, but you just like anyways. I got another Crystal Shard, so meh. Manifold Key, so this is, I think, an improved Voltaic Key. So this is probably, you know, desirable by some group. Bloodbraid Elf. So sick. Love that it has the original artwork. I love that artwork. And yeah, definitely gonna guess a full set of these. One I was happy to pull. Another Night of the Reliquary. Again, can't complain about that. Pretty sweet. And my third epic experiment. So this is of course the one I get 3 copies of. Another Slimefoot. Yeah, not too anything to write home about. And a Cloud Shredder. This is where you kind of like want to take the card and just rip it in half, right? Because you're just like, really? Cloud Shredder? No, don't get a Thoughtseize, but get multiple Cloud Shredders. Grenzo. So I think I opened like 2 packs of whatever set this is from. And I ended up opening a Grenzo. So he's cool. I could see myself playing like a building commander deck with him in mind one day. But yeah, I'm glad that, you know, at least somebody's going to play this card. And Consuming Aberration. So this one I'm not sure who this was for. Hopefully it's for casual / commander players, because this is not seeing anywhere any play. And again, this feels like a missed opportunity kind of reprint where they could have done something cool. You know, like Glimpse the Unthinkable or something. Instead we got this card. And you'll notice that I hit no foil time shifted cards in this box. So that kind of contributed to the fact that this box was overall quite underwhelming. We did okay in the Time Spiral, the regular Time Spiral rares. And then really the big card we hit was Chalice, and then didn't hit any other big ones like Thoughtseize or anything else. And even like the Mythics, Caverns, So that's kind of why I wasn't too happy with the box. I was quite negative with it. Looking at it again, it's definitely probably on the lower end of certainly what you would want to open. I think it wouldn't be desirable by anyone. But that's how it goes, right? That's how it goes with box opening. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Actually ended up being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be quite a short video. But though I do have a lot to say about Time Spiral being one of my favorite sets and blocks of all time. So hopefully you enjoyed this. And yeah, if you stuck around this long, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll be joining up again for some more Magic in the future with some Strixhaven coming. So, thank you, and have a good night.